Howdy, folks, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Old West Traveler, where we bring you true tales from the days of the Wild West. Well, I reckon I've seen a lot in my day, but Wyatt Earp's brush with the law back in 1871 sure was one for the books. It was a time when folks were carving out their future on the rugged frontier, and even a man like Wyatt could get caught up in something like horse thieving. Now, if you would have been around, you might have heard tell of Earp as a lawman, keeping the peace in the places like Dodge City and Tombstone. But long before that, the man had his own troubles with the law, and one that still raises some eyebrows to this day. You see, the year was 1871, and the setting was the wild and untamed Indian territories, where the law barely had a foothold. Earp found himself arrested for horse theft, a serious crime back in those days. Deputy U.S. Marshal Jacob Owens filed the complaint, claiming that Earp, along with two other men, Ed Kennedy and John Snow, had made off with two horses. Now, this was no small matter. In those days, stealing a man's horse could be just as bad as stealing his livelihood. But the real twist here was that the arrest cast a long shadow over Wyatt Earp's many of us came to know, a figure of frontier justice. Some folks, especially those that would idolize Earp in later years, tried to brush this arrest off. They wanted to believe it wasn't true. They wanted to believe it wasn't our Wyatt. Maybe some other man by the same name geographically tells us a different story. Wyatt had left Lamar, Missouri, where he had been accused of stealing some public money, and ended up in Indian Territory just a few months before his arrest, less than 100 miles from where that theft took place. So yeah, it's likely he's our man. Now, the Indian Territory at the time wasn't for all the faint-hearted. The place was lawless, crawling with outlaws, and the U.S. Marshals who were supposed to be keeping order, well, let's just say many of them were corrupt, no better than the criminals they hunted. Some had fought in the Civil War and brought that same kind of violence and ruthlessness into their jobs. Hell, even Charles Portis, who wrote True Grit because of his reputation. When Earp got picked up, it was under the cloud of this kind of rough justice. The charges were pretty clear. He and his partners were said to have stolen two horses from a fellow named William Keyes. But John Snow's wife, Anna, swore up and down that Wyatt and Ed Kennedy had tricked her husband into the whole thing. She claimed they'd gotten him drunk, saddled him up on one of the stolen horses, and had him lead the other to a meeting place where they'd all flee north into Kansas. It didn't take long for Keyes to catch up with them, and the law wasn't far behind. Now, here's the thing. Whether Wyatt actually stole the horses or not, what's important is that the legal system in Indian Territory wasn't exactly above board. The marshals, like Owens, were known for making arrests just to collect fees, and some folks believe that Wyatt may have been just another victim of these trumped-up charges. In fact, corruption was so widespread that just a few years later, a congressional investigation uncovered many arrests were made simply to line the pockets of the U.S. Marshals. When Wyatt found himself behind bars, it didn't take long for him to make his move. He was held in a cell with 5 other men, including Snow and 2 accused murderers. One day, the 6 of them, they pried off some rafters, crawled through the window, and lowered themselves down into a makeshift rope tied up blankets. They slipped under the jail fence and hightailed it out to Van Buren, Arkansas. By May 3rd, Wyatt was a free man once again. What happened next? Well, Wyatt went on to make his name as a lawman, but that horse theft charge followed him around like a ghost. Some say the charges were bogus, part of the corrupt system of the Indian Territory, while others think maybe Wyatt wasn't always the upstanding figure we remember. Whatever the case, the man dodged a bullet that day and lived to write a different chapter of his life, a chapter that would take him to Dodge City, Tombstone, and eventually into the history books of one of the most legendary figures of the Old West. So was Wyatt a horse thief? Well, we may not know for sure, but in a land as wild and unpredictable as the Indian Territory, sometimes it wasn't just about right and wrong, it was about survival. And Wyatt Earp, well, he was a survivor through and through. Thank you for listening to another Old West Traveler's Tale. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope you would do us a big favor. Hit that subscribe button and join us every week for more tales from the Old West.